Welcome to Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel, and my guest today, who is Lee Adams, who is the author of this wonderful book. And it's so I was looking at your chart, Lee,
Yes.
and I was thinking, what what would I expect to see in the chart of someone who's written a book called A Visionary Guide to Lucid Dreaming? And so it's interesting because you weren't too sure about your time of birth, but there is something here that speaks and says that perhaps you're not far off. And that is that you have the Sun and Venus in a part of the chart that it's called the ninth house. And so the ninth house it's about finding meaning. It's about making sense of the world. It's about journeys of a kind. Now, it could be literally somebody who travels from place to place. But I find this signature also very much in the charts of people whose minds travel, and so who are involved in academia, who understand patterns in the way that that humanity expresses itself, or I guess the word I'm really looking for is archetypes, through myth, through story, and so I just wonder whether you recognize that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I joined the Navy when I was young too. So I traveled the world. I'd move 7 times in one year, and then later on I was on a ship. So you're constantly moving. You're never really in one place for very much of a long period. So my life has been pretty much traveling and moving constantly. So not just in the physical world, but spiritually as well and psychologically. Yeah, very
Well,
accurate.
it's interesting because the what I haven't said is what sign your sun is in,
Hmm.
and you have Sun and Venus. And if your time of birth is correct, as I'm beginning to suspect more and more that it is, you also have the midheaven in the sign of Aries, which is a sign. It's the sign that we associate with the military.
Hmm.
So there it is. So the traveling through the Navy. I was just wondering what Neptune's doing, because Neptune, god of the seas, what's he doing in your chart? And there is a link between Neptune and Venus. So yeah, I think Venus represents things that we love.
Hmm.
And so there it is in the ninth house, and everything we said would be things that you love. And so I'm not surprised, in a sense, with that connection to Neptune, that you not only spend a lot of time thinking about what we do in our sleep and dreams,
Hmm.
which is a very Neptunian exercise, but that you actually spend time at sea.
Hmm. Yeah.
What can I? What what made you choose the Navy?
Well, I wanted to fly, and for the United States Navy, it's one of the best ways to actually get into being able to fly. Most people don't know that. Excuse me, sorry. But the Air Force, typically for the military, is considered like the aviation side of things, and not so much the Navy. But through you know kind of diving into that, I realized that there's more naval aircraft, and so you have a better chance of flying if you join the Navy overall. So I never ended up being a pilot. That's kind of an interesting story, but yeah, I made it to flight school eventually, after about 8 years, and then I had an inner ear issue, so I wasn't able to fly. So that kind of stopped things right there. And one dream opens up another dream. So, but yeah.
I was just listening to you, and of course the other thing I've noticed is that there is there are 3 planets in the sign of Scorpio. It's Pluto, Saturn, and Mars, all in Scorpio. And Scorpio is the other sign associated with military, and particularly Navy also. So there it is. And it's in the 4th house, a watery house, a house we associate with water as well. Do you get out onto the sea much now?
Not so much. I have a friend, he ended up being interested in boats as well, and I'm not so much interested in being on the ocean. I've had enough of it, I think. But he bought a sailboat, and so I've been out with him and enjoyed that. And I do enjoy the ocean. I've always been interested in the ocean and like getting on it and being near it. So I definitely had that, but being on the naval vessels has kind of changed my perspective of what it means to be on the sea for long periods of time. It's not as fun as people sometimes imagine it. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
The romance is lost.
Yeah, there's not a lot of romance there. But it's definitely has its beauty, and just like anything, it has 2 sides, like the sea definitely has beauty, and also that that aggression, and anger that it can express, so there's 2 sides to that coin for sure. Most people only see one side, because they're not on it a lot.
And that is actually, those are words we could use to describe what goes on in our subconscious as well.
Yes, definitely.
Which is the other meaning that we can think of with Neptune, is that it's very much about the subconscious, and particularly it's about dreams. So I'm wondering, how did you get interested in this field?
Well, I've always been interested in dreams. I had dreams as a young child, like everybody, and but growing up, I realized that people don't recall their dreams to the level that I typically did, and also I had lucid dreams at a very young age. So I tell my mom about dreams that I was having, lucid dreams included, and then I realized that a lot of people didn't have those as well. So I had to kind of go out and find my own way to understand my experiences. Um, and I met some friends along the way that they also were able to have lucid dreams. So we talked about those quite a bit and kind of figured out our own process of understanding dream experiences. And it wasn't until much later that I started to kind of get a more formal education on dreams. And once the internet was around, that's a lot easier to communicate with people that actually kind of have some knowledge on the subject. And I had some more spiritual type experiences, dream related, later in life too, and with like sleep paralysis and stuff like that, and then out of body experiences, and that kind of opened me up to and that coincided with my more formal education. It kind of amplified it to be something that I was really interested in at that point, instead of just having it as some type of hobby, like thing that happened and then I'd shut off, after once I started having sleep paralysis and out of body experiences. That's when things really amplified for me, and I was like, this is something different and special, and so it's been a great journey, and something that I really cherish, and something I'm going to continue for the remaining of my life.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple of things that come to mind again listening to you. The first is um, Neptune, as we've already been talking, god of the sea, linked with the subconscious, sitting in your 5th house, which is the house that we link with fun, imagination, hobbies. So it's almost like your dreams became a hobby,
Mm-hmm.
and it led then to something else. And Neptune itself, although sitting in the 5th house, rules the ninth house, which we were talking about in relation to travel of the mind, etc. And I think what that means is that the way in which you would explore meaning would be a Neptunian way.
Mm.
And that then dreams would be one of the means by which you explore meaning. And when I say meaning, I mean the meaning of your life
Mm.
as a whole. So it's almost like the portal to discovering yourself as a spiritual being, having that there. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm attracted to that aspect, of life, the unconscious, in interacting with that water type material definitely is something. I've always been around some type of water, um, once I got old enough to be able to move and be. I actually was born in Idaho, which is landlocked, not much water going on there. And terrified actually of like the water because of sharks and things like that. I saw Jaws as a young kid and that scared the bejesus out of me. So yeah, so I was pretty terrified of it, but I still was like attracted to it, some type of that mystery in the water. And lots of dreams associated with water, so, and that usually comes with people attracted to water in some form, and so yeah, definitely, I can definitely see that. And I do find meaning through my dream experiences versus like, say, typical extroverted experiences that some people find meaning in. I usually find it in dreams. And I've become more extroverted lately as I realized the connection between waking reality and dream experiences symbolically. So that's been a large shift in my life. Normally, I'd say up until this point, I completely almost disregarded waking reality as even meaningful in any sense. So yeah, it's been quite a shift and change for me.
So I was thinking one thing, and then when you said that last bit, it took me in a completely different direction. And I think it was just when you said about um, the dream side of things being more real to you than what we would say conscious reality is.
Hmm.
It just made me think about the Hindu tradition of, the world being really a dream.
Hmm.
That and there's other traditions too, dream world, that the idea that what we're living in is actually a dream,
Right.
and
Yeah.
dreams are more real. So perhaps you have a greater affinity with Eastern philosophies than than the West in that respect.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I took Buddhism in during my undergrad for one of my classes. It was kind of um, a coincidence or synchronistic type of experience, and ended up going into this class I knew nothing about. I thought it would be an easy grade. That's why I chose that class. But I was interested in religions and spiritual, practices. So I took Buddhism, and it the teacher became a great friend of mine. He still is. And I learned a lot from that class about Buddhism and Eastern traditions, and I did notice that I had a huge connection to that modality of thinking, and I still do, and um, it's just it seems to align better with me than more Western thoughts. And I do agree. And I didn't really understand that idea of waking reality being a dream, until recently when I started to understand the relationship of symbols and image in a ancient traditional sense, not the modern idea that we have of materialism and symbols and images. And so I approached them from a more ancient aspect, or maybe like a native, American native traditions kind of saw, I think, waking reality much like that. And and so yeah, it to me it makes sense that waking reality is a dream. Um, but if I use that in terms of like what Westerners think of as dream, then they're like, oh well, then it's not real. So it kind of discredits the reality of waking, and that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying they're they're equally important, and um, they're equally real in their own sense, and how they express themselves are similar, and and so um, it's not like we live in a simulation or something like that. People often go in that direction. They're like, oh, it's just a simulation, it doesn't mean anything. What I'm saying is that waking reality has so much meaning that you can engage with it in a very magical way and learn from it in that sense too. So um so it's kind of for me, it's been a journey in itself to finally kind of go back, come full circle and be like, oh, okay, it's not about dreams. It's all a dream, you know. And so my book like actually works well for people that understand that and can apply it to waking reality, and I do too. Um, because and my book is kind of like a journey in itself, because I wrote that years ago, and anybody that's written a book can tell you that there's no end to updating it. Like you're constantly changing, as you go along. You're like, well, do I agree with this now? Eventually, you have to get to the point where you give it up, and actually get the book out to people. Um, but if I would have continued writing for the years that the book took to actually get out, it'd be a vastly different book, I think, or it would extend even more so into bringing it back into waking reality, and how showing the similarities between dreams and reality, and then showing you how you can actually use symbols in waking reality to engage with it on a dream like scale.
So everything that we've been talking about has been emotional, abstract, subconscious, but there is a part of you which I think is the part of you that's led you down actually quite a scientific route, in a sense, because of your interest in psychology um, and brain chemistry and so on. And I think so. Reading your book, it actually initially, when you start reading it, it sounds very scientific. And I was looking at the fact that you've got the moon in Virgo and Mercury in Taurus, and both are earth signs, and that's where you do the tangibles. And that's where, with that moon in Virgo, detail, you notice detail, and it's wanting to cross the T's and dot the I's and make sure that everything is it's you still I think what I'm saying is, for all of the symbolic stuff that we are talking about, there's a part of you that needs to have the explanation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I mean,
That, that's that Virgo and Taurus side, both earth signs.
yeah, I mean, I spent a large portion of my time kind of trying to get facts in order, and try to prove things. So I spent a good portion of the last, 15 years studying, 15, 20 years studying dreams, to really kind of prove things and get it in an order that I can understand it, like identify the pattern and really kind of prove it, and prove if it's real or it's fake. Um, and sorry, and it took me a long time to really kind of realize that's not exactly how dreams work. You can kind of do that, but it's going to lead you down a road, to eventually find yourself, So if you're observant enough to symbols and you're observant enough to dreams, then they tell you a story, and having a scientific type approach to it, I think, is important, because otherwise you kind of you can spin out of control in these relationships and these experiences that you have in dreams. But if you keep at least somewhat grounded, which science provides that groundness, then you can kind of start seeing it for what it is. And but if you're so grounded, and you're so into the material, then you lose the sense of the creativeness of the dream. You start pulling it to pieces, and you forget that it's an actual consciousness. So I tend to like use the analogy of sitting down with like a friend, or you having a conversation. I would never sit there and try to analyze everything you say and then say, well, you're so many ums and so many ands and whatever. That's not what a conversation's about. There is that, but the conversation, it evolves, it's alive, and so it would be it'd be illogical of me to actually like reduce you down to those words. That's not who you actually are or our conversation. It's the combination and the evolution of that makes it really alive and have meaning to it. So um I've been what I call a fence setter all my life, and it's like usually the in between of two different states, like the material or the spiritual, and I'm sitting in the middle going, okay, well, what's going on here? Why do both exist, and trying to understand that relationship. So I definitely resonate very much so to what you're saying.
Yeah, it's, it's keeping that balance, isn't it? Because we are living in a physical world. But then if we don't accept that there is more to that, then we are shutting off a whole part of human experience, a very large part of human experience. But equally, if we just have our heads in the clouds, as they say, then we're also missing out on
Yeah.
a very important part of human experience. We are both, and I think that's what your chart is speaking to me about, is the need to understand um, how they both work together, or how they both should work together, and you said it. Why is it that we've got both?
Hmm.
And you can see that. And then, of course, whilst you're working all of this out, you've got a very strong ninth house, as we've already said. And what does that mean that you end up doing? You want to um, teach it, share it, communicate it. You've got the North Node in the sign of Gemini, and the North Node is about, let's say, it's an indicator of our soul's purpose.
Mm.
And it's in Gemini, which is the sign of communication and writing. And then that ninth house that we've talked about, one of its things is also publishing. So it's kind of inevitable that you end up writing about what you discover.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I felt like I needed to get that book out, um, almost, at all costs in a way. Um, so I don't really know what that means, um, but I definitely wasn't trying to get rich or anything like that. That's not what you write books usually for. But it's to communicate something I feel very important, and not necessarily do I think that I even understand what is important in my book to the reader. So, um, you know, every time I read a book, I can find something very different than, say, a friend that reads a book of the same. We pick up on different things. So, when I wrote my book, I had a very specific intention behind the words I was saying. And through editing and multiple editors and things like that, some of the content has changed, you know, to be more focused on certain things that maybe I didn't intend, or you know, I changed things to make it sound better and make it understandable to people. And through that, you know, it's kind of a group artistic piece of art almost, you know, like it's almost artwork now, created by multiple people. And through that, you know, I think there's a message in there that is important for somebody to read. And even maybe myself, you know, like something I can read later on and be like, wow, I never really even noticed that I thought that, you know, or something like that. I've done that with dream journals, you know, come back and be like, whoa, like I was telling myself something that I didn't understand at the time, but then 10 years later, reading the same dream, I found a different meaning into it that I never initially thought, you know. So I think there's something important in my book, in that sense. But also I think that it does bring a mythological approach to dreams. And the main story I'm trying to tell people is essentially each of us has a myth, and that dreams are trying to communicate that myth, so we can have our journey. And that's why I relate to like the hero's journey, because that's a mythological like theme that exists kind of in all myths. At least Joseph Campbell thinks so. So, and I agree. Not in so sense that Joseph Campbell was right in everything he was saying, but that the myth is there regardless, you know.
It's an
So
archetype.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So
It's,
yeah.
I think that the very act of writing is a way of processing information for yourself.
Mm,
So you, as you are writing, you are having to structure thoughts, make sense of them,
mhm.
because you're having to communicate them. It's the same when you're teaching. You have to um, be able to make sense of the material. So it's a really good exercise, isn't it? So
Oh yes.
you're it's both about processing your own thinking and then sharing that with others. So if people wanted to learn more about what you do or get in touch with you, where could they find you?
Um, so my website, it's taileaters.com, and I have many different articles there on different subjects. And I hosted a podcast for a while, so they can find my interviews there. Um, and there's some artwork and stuff like that too on the site. Um, but it has a lot of articles on sleep, consciousness, psychedelics, and things like that. So a lot of my content in my book is actually through my website. So I kind of use that as like a stepping stone in order to write a book eventually. That's not uncommon, I guess, for people to do. So it was helpful in that sense, but it did exactly what you said. You know, it provided me a way to kind of peer inside myself um, from an outside. You know, it's a projection. So I projected onto the text, you know, like the internal workings of my psyche, and kind of can use it as a mirror to reflect on myself and see deeper inside myself. So that's what I'm doing with my writing, like you said. Um, but people can go to that website, tailorators.com, and they can engage with the writing. Um, there's some really good articles on like image and symbols that I wrote some of them, and some of my friends wrote some other ones. And it was kind of interesting because like at the time that my friend wrote the articles, I was kind of giving him a space to kind of express himself, you know. And I said he wanted to be read, you know, he wanted to express himself to people, and I was like, hey, you can use my site, you know, to kind of talk about that. And so, you know, he did, and I gave him he's a very intelligent guy, so I gave him kind of the space to do that, and not really like nitpicked his writing or anything like that, you know. Just kind of posted it and let it go. And years later, I went and back and reread what he wrote, and he had such an advanced understanding of symbols and myth that I didn't really even realize that he had. so it was interesting, but I had a lot to learn from him and I didn't realize that. So anyways, it's kind of a group effort. The site, it's not just me. And I try to really make that a point when I made the website, is try to get other people to use it as a way to express themselves. So, but there's quite a bit from my own writing in there.
Funny, I thought I had done, but listening to you, I was thinking about this in the back of my mind. I've had this North Node sitting in the 11th house, a house to do with groups and bringing people together. And here you are, through that North Node in Gemini, which I've already said is about writing and communicating, creating a website where one of your aims is to give other people a forum as well. So there it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I run a number of Facebook groups, and then I have my own social network off Facebook for psychedelic people. So I was kind of inspired to create that for those people because they were having problems with kind of Facebook getting really on them at the time. This was a couple of years ago, so things have really accelerated in that area. So it's good that I made that space for people to kind of express themselves in that subject. So it's been really great for them. And oddly, I'm not really actually interested in so much so in psychedelics anymore, but I still run that group for those people and make it so that they have a space, to share and to communicate and connect. So
Well, things about having the Sun and Venus in the 9th house is that freedom is everything.
yes, yeah, freedom of speech is a very big thing for me. Freedom of
Yeah.
thought, not so much speech, I guess, but the ability to find information and find it your own way, and be able to think freely is top of my priorities. That's why, and it is partially why I joined the military, because I did believe in the goal, essentially, freedom, but there's a lot of controversy around that in the military, right? So, but
Well, that's a whole other discussion.
yes, definitely. They got me, I'll tell you that. The marketing worked.
Oh, well, Lee, I want to say thank you very much for joining us on Life Astrologer today. And I will make sure that the link to your website is on the description box, along with the link to your book,
Great.
so that people can find you. And thank you all for watching this episode of Life Astrologer. On the description box, you'll also find out how to get hold of me and also how you can learn more about astrology. Thank you for watching, and do please subscribe and share. And until next time, goodbye.